Now, a vocal supporter of President Trump says his company is taking a hit for his loyalty. Mike Lindell is CEO of MyPillow. He says major retailers have dropped his product. Kohl's and Bed Bath & Beyond say that their decision is due to poor sales rather than Lindell's actions or his support for Trump. Lindell has continued to push bogus claims of election fraud, leading to extensive pressure on social media for outlets to stop selling MyPillow. Meantime, opposing the certification of Joe Biden's election is costing some lawmakers donations. Dozens of companies have suspended donations to the 147 Republicans in Congress who objected to certifying the Electoral College vote. Judd Legum's newsletter, Popular Information, has tens of thousands of subscribers, and many companies announced a freeze on donations as a result of his reporting. And he joins us now. Judd, your newsletter is being credited with promoting, or I should say prompting, this corporate reckoning. And now you have companies from Walmart to Amazon to Morgan Stanley and Dell cutting off their financial support. Were you surprised that this was the outcome?
Yes, I was surprised that this was the outcome. Myself and my research assistant, we last week, shortly after the riot at the Capitol, contacted 144 companies that had ended up donating to the senators that followed through and raised that objection. And the initial response was not huge. We got back, maybe 15 responses, but 3 of the companies, Marriott, Commerce Bank, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, said that they would be suspending the donations to this group of 147 members of Congress, all Republicans. And that kind of got the ball rolling. And since then, we've been hearing from more and more and more companies. So it's become quite a thing.
It's become quite a thing. What's your sense of how this unfolded? Do you think the companies were already planning to suspend donations and then confirmed it publicly when you contacted them, and then it kind of became a thing where companies didn't want to be the last in line to say that they too were suspending donations?
Well, that's certainly the dynamic now. I think the companies that are coming out now are the ones who clearly were never planning on doing this, but are doing it from pressure from other companies, from the public, from their own employees. One of the things that really surprised me today was Oracle. Larry Ellison, the chair of or the CEO of Oracle, is one of Trump's biggest supporters, and they came out and said they're not going to donate to this group of people. But that happened after 500 employees wrote the board a letter demanding action. So I think that's what's going on now. As far as what went on initially, I do think Marriott's decision was very critical. That drove a lot of headlines, and I think got a lot of people talking and a lot of their employees talking. I think the employees at these companies are really what's driving a lot of the action.
Yeah, definitely. And Marriott was definitely out front there. A lot of people, though, will say that the companies saying they won't make political contributions is hardly taking a stance when you just had an election and congressmen and congresswomen are not exactly in fundraising mode. I mean, that's what the cynic would say. What do you think?
I think it's good to be cynical sometimes, especially with campaign donations. There's been a few companies. American Express was one of them. I had a back and forth with their communications flack, and he was very clear that they were not making a temporary decision, that this was permanent, that they would never donate to these 147 members of Congress ever again. Most companies, though, have described it as a pause and a freeze, and I think whether or not this amounts to something lasting is going to reveal itself over years. And it's the job of myself and other people who are interested in the story to keep track and see what happens. Because at some point, these donations will be unfrozen, and we'll have to see, is it back to normal? Do things look like they did on January 5th? Or has there been real changes in a systemic way?
Yeah. Also talk a little bit about how the corporate responses really ran the gamut. You had a number of companies, I believe 50 at last count, that didn't respond. Others, like CVS, are reviewing their policies but haven't actually made any changes. And then you've got Hallmark, which seems to have gone the furthest, in fact, saying that it's going to seek refunds from the senators who objected to the results.
Yeah, I do think it's run the gamut. Hallmark, I think, has been the most aggressive, and it's quite striking because they're located in Kansas City. They're one of the biggest employers in Kansas City, and they're demanding a refund from their home state senator, Josh Hawley. And so normally, obviously, you'd expect a very close collaborative relationship between one of your state's major employers and one of the state senators. But in this case, Hallmark is saying you've crossed so far over the line, we want nothing to do with you. I think on the other end of the spectrum, you have these companies who are saying, we're not only going to pause our donations to the 147 Republicans, we're just going to do a total pause for 3 months or 6 months. That really does amount to very little because, as you mentioned, we are at the beginning of a campaign cycle. There's not a lot of people running campaign ads right now, whether you're in the House or the Senate. And if in 6 months they just go ahead and max out as they were planning to, whoever they wanted to, there's really no change from the status quo. So we're going to have to look at these companies. We're going to get our first look in July. There's not a lot of filings in an off year. These PACs only file twice a year, so you get your first look in July and then again at the end of the year, and we'll start to see what happens. In fact, I don't even think we're going to see a lot in July because that probably will cover the pause.
Right.
It'll be the next 6 months where you would see if things start to change or not.
Okay, very quickly here. I know you're not a journalist by training. You were research director for Hillary Rodham Clinton's presidential campaign in 2008. You also ran for state delegate in Maryland, winning the party nomination but losing the general election in 2010. Very quickly, what do most people misunderstand about the role of corporate donations for elected officials?
I think that they can be a very important source of money, especially for incumbents. And they also are a way for these corporations, not necessarily to buy votes, but it does get them access and it gives them a leg up over, an ordinary citizen or person. So to the extent that these changes are making them less willing to make these kind of donations, it could be a good thing for the democratic process.
Ched Legum, really appreciate your joining us, publisher of Popular Information. Thank you so much.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.